The kitchen hearth is the centre of the house. There may be other fireplaces in other rooms, but they are only for occasional use. But the kitchen is also the living room of the old farmhouse, and the big open hearth is the centre around which the household revolves. It is, of course, the functional, the working centre, for there are few domestic activities in which the fire doesn't play some part. But equally important, or even more important, is the fact that in our tradition the hearth is also the social centre of the house. The traditional greeting to the visitor was, Falterot, Dridsus Honetine, you're welcome, move up to the fire. The welcome guest was seated at the hearth. In the evening the family and friends sat around the hearth, and here the news of the day, the affairs of the parish and of the world were discussed. Here the seanachaí and the storyteller held court. Here the traditions of the past were handed down through the centuries. The hearth gave direction and orientation to the whole house. You went up from the kitchen to the room beyond the hearth wall. This was said to be above the kitchen. A room off the other end of the kitchen was below the kitchen. A neighbour asking for the man of the house might be told that he was above in the room or below in the room, and would know at once where to turn. And this regard for the hearth as the centre of the house is still strong in us. For on a warm summer evening we sit in our suburban front rooms facing an empty grate. And in an ultra-modern flat with some wonderful heating system and no fireplace at all, we find it hard to orientate ourselves. We are not sure which way we should face when we sit down. In a room with a fireplace we have no doubt whether or not there is a fire in it, and we would think it very odd indeed if somebody came into our room and turned his chair around and sat down with his back to the fireplace. Now this social centering on the hearth has naturally had an effect on its form, for there is always room to sit around the fire. In this old kitchen in County Mayo there is, as you see, a stone seat built in on each side. The constant heat makes it warm and comfortable to sit on. While in West County Cork and South County Kerry, there is usually a long wooden bench like a garden seat, on which 4 people can sit in comfort, on one side of the hearth. Indeed, a tired man can lie full length in this seat, and many a weary traveller was glad of a bed on it on a cold winter night. In other parts of the country, there is room for 2 or 3 chairs on each side of the big open hearth. The chairs in the corner are the seats of honour. To be offered one of these was a compliment to the guest, for these were the places of the man of the house and of the woman of the house, and usually there was a little opening in the wall close to each of them. You can see it here on the right-hand side of the picture. The man's tobacco pipe was kept in one, the woman's snuff box and knitting in the other. Now, in the everyday work of the household, the open hearth had the great advantage that it could hold not just one fire, but 2 or 3 different fires of different sizes and different degrees of intensity as needed. The pot can be hung on the great swinging crane, swung in over the main part of the fire. Another small fire baking bread. The tea can be made, good strong tea as is usual in the Irish farmhouse, and it can be placed on a little fire of its own on the hearth. You can see how the housewife rakes out a little bit of the fire, makes a separate little fire, and puts the teapot upon it. Now the hearth is equipped with all the necessary fire irons, big tongs, shovel, brush, pot hangers and so on. You can see here the bread oven, the big tongs, a shovel for moving cinders, pots of different sizes, all useful in the open hearth. And another Irish tradition which has had its effect on the form of the hearth is our love of fresh and of freshly cooked food. You know, in some parts of the world, it's customary to keep a large store of cooked food or food which is otherwise prepared, to keep it in a store to draw upon it when necessary. Even bread can be stored in this way. Here you see the bread store in a Swiss farmhouse. Each loaf has a hole in the centre, and the loaves are strung in long rows on rods which are attached to the ceiling of the kitchen. Indeed, in some parts of Europe, bread is baked only twice a year, a very large quantity at the time, and stored ready for use in this way. And similarly with meat, with fish, with fruits, with vegetables, they could be smoked or dried or frozen according to the local custom, but not here in Ireland. Nua gacha big, agus shan gacha di was our motto. Always the freshest of food, always freshly cooked. And that meant the continual cooking of small quantities of food in small vessels. And of course, that could be done on the open hearth with ease.